Alright, Envoy Official. It's time to talk about this topic of poly relationships. Um, so one thing, I've kind of noticed is, this, I don't know I don't want to be like offensive, and I have not thought through the wording of what I'm trying to say here, so please don't take offense, because I'm not trying to say that just because someone's doing something that seems heteronormative, that is less valid than someone who's doing something very like closer to queer culture, or closer to just like some kind of alternative lifestyle. um you know what I mean? So for example, um I don't even know. This is not what I'm trying to say, but I'm just going to give an example. um Something that would be heteronormative mainstream would be a husband and a wife of the same religion and the same, you know, ethnicity and cultural background, marrying each other. Cis hetero straight couple. That's like very heteronormative, and you don't have all these other uh, layers. I mean, people are so different that honestly you would. But let's just say in this scenario that there's so much similarity going on. There's probably not going to be that many people who are going to be like trying to test that, or like be against it, or be like, oh, like, why'd you marry somebody that's your same, race? Why'd you marry someone that's your same political affiliation? Why'd you marry someone of the same religion? Like, you don't usually hear people complaining about, like, why'd you marry someone with the same, like, language backgrounds and the same, you know, you know, location of upbringing. Like, usually people almost praise more sometimes, in some cultures and some families. People praise more the people the people who decide to marry within um within um their culture. And then the more you step a little more outside, on one level, if it's like a religion, or like a nationality thing, or like an ethnicity thing, or like a racial thing, or a language thing, like, what was your first language? Like, oh, Hindi was my first language. Like, oh, my first language was Zulu. It's like, okay, like, those are like way different. um like, and then there's open-minded people too, but I'm just saying, like, that would be like a classic heteronormative, just like cis straight, like, nobody's really gonna like be protesting anything on that end. And then you have something all the way on another end, where it's like, maybe you have some polygamous culture in, you know somewhere in the Middle East, or somewhere. I mean, I don't really want to pick on Mormons, because I think it's like more fundamentalists and some other groups that practice polygamy. But polygamy and polyamory are not the same thing. um Polygamy is like when a man can marry multiple wives. And there are multiple cultures where that is something that happens. Like, there are a lot of African cultures where people do that, some Middle Eastern cultures where people do that, some cultures of Islam where people do that. You know, um, but that wouldn't be considered like a mainstream hetero relationship. That's more of a kind of like alternative, right? But it's still hetero. Like, you usually don't have like bisexual polygamy or something. I don't know. I've never heard of that in my life. I don't mean to like laugh or anything, but I'm trying to like picture this. It's like a guy has like one of each. He wants a lesbian wife and a cis straight wife and a a trans male husband and a bisexual cis male husband and a gay male husband, and he wants like one of each. Um, I mean, maybe that exists. I've never heard of that in my life. That would be like the most alternative thing if I ever saw anything like that, where there were people that were just like marrying all the different types. But I would say like with um like poly relationships, you might have something like that if there's somebody who isn't really um just solid like a like if they're not a cis straight person, if you have like a queer person, they might really want to date different types of people. Like, and I don't know, people can get sensitive about these topics. Like I know there is this whole, I never even knew where this started from, but there's this whole um I don't know if it's like a culture or this whole like, I don't know if people really mean it when they say it, like about bisexual people. Like I don't think this way, but I've heard it. I think the first time I heard somebody say this was actually one of my youth pastors that was pretty open minded about like lesbians, gay people. Like there weren't really a lot of people talking about like trans people, non-binary people. A lot of the gender stuff, like people weren't really like too verbal about that in my upbringing. Like I'm an elder millennial, like that wasn't like just to have a youth pastor that was like willing to talk about non-hetero relationships in an open-minded way was like a miracle, because I grew up in a pretty strict religious environment where people weren't even like they were still debating about like, can we teach our kids sex ed in the classroom or just wait and do it at home kind of thing. Like there was still that debate. There was not um like, yeah, there were still people who would like leave the room if they were teaching sex ed, or like when the pastor would preach on occasion about like sexual topics. Like I think there was one, I don't know if it was just once, but I think we went through the 10 commandments over a series of weeks. It must have been 10 weeks, I don't really know. I don't remember, maybe we combined some of the commandments some of the weeks, but one of the weeks, or one of the times, I know he was talking about like, thou shalt not commit adultery, and then they mentioned the week before, hey, if you have younger kids or kids that you don't want to hear this, there's a available space with like childcare or like activities in this other room where you can take your kids or tell them to go sit there if you don't want them to be like involved in this part of the sermon next week. And then the week of, they kind of reminded everyone again, if you don't want your kids hearing this, because some people like their kids to sit through the service, and then there were like classes for kids during the sermon where it's like they could go be with like certain age ranges. Up until like your teen years, you were pretty much allowed to go to these types of little classes, and they were arranged by like age groups, kind of not like kindergarten, first, second, third, like that necessarily per grade, but it was like they combined like younger kids, kind of middle younger kids, and then like older kids. And then once you were like probably like somewhere around 12, 13, 14, you probably kind of aged out of that. Like it would look weird to go to those kind of things because you're kind of a little older. Once you could like sit still through a sermon and like understand what was going on versus needing to like color some pictures of Jesus or whatever. Like once it wasn't like fully over your head, you were kind of expected to sit and listen. Um so yeah, I was still from an age where people were still, not really even fully allowing the pastor of the church to talk about sexual topics. And so, yeah, I remember having this youth pastor that, we'd go to his place on Friday nights, and he was like, he stayed and he became like our youth pastor, teen pastor, and then up until my collegiate years, and early collegiate years, and then he left. And then, but yeah, I remember him saying like, oh, like, yeah, like lesbians and gay people, and like he said positive things. He wasn't saying like anything negative, but then he was like, bisexuals are greedy or something like that. Like, he kind of said that, and I was just kind of like, what? And I remember the look on one of my other friends' faces being like, no, and she kind of wasn't like um open. Like, I could tell he was joking, but she didn't like the joke, and I didn't like the joke either. Um, but I was laughing because it was also kind of funny. Um, because like just the way he said it was kind of like funny. Because like it was kind of like awkward with them even talking about any kind of sexual topics. Because this was not normal. Like this church did not normally talk about this kind of stuff. But I'm not necessarily talking about church right now. I'm just saying like I grew up heavily in the church, and so I can't just like not talk about it if I'm talking about my life and my upbringing. It's like it was like a regular part. Like I went to church school 5 days a week. I went to church on Saturdays. I went to a religious sports league on Sundays. It was like every freaking day of the week up until like my first year of grad school. I was pretty much involved with this church, and so was it my first year of grad school? Yeah, pretty much. No, well, I mean, when I got out of the school at 10th grade, I was no longer going to school on weekdays, but I was still going to church and sports league. So I kind of like slowly phased out as I got older. Um, Very slowly though. Like I'm still like affiliated in some ways. Like I'm still like I still talk to them and stuff. I'm not like gonna like I'm not like bitter. Um, but yeah, I remember him mentioning that, and that was the first time I heard him say that. And I think shortly after that, that friend who was kind of upset with his remarks was kind of like she kind of mentioned something about like bisexuals not being greedy, and I kind of like heard her out about it, and I was kind of like, yeah, maybe she's right, because that is kind of like a weird way of thinking. um like why would they be the greedy ones? And like I think there are greedy individuals of any kind. It doesn't matter if you're bisexual or not, because I think people mistake bisexuals for like cheaters. Like just because you're bi doesn't mean that you're just like going around just like cheating on everybody. Like that's not how it works. Um, and the same with poly people. Just because you're poly doesn't mean that you don't have rules in your relationships, that you don't follow the rules, or that you're more risky of like breaking the rules or anything. Um, I just think the hard part about poly um kind of I don't want to call it only poly. I want to say poly, and I want to say alternative, because I want to also touch on um kind of like friends with benefits scenarios. And the thing that I don't really like about the name is that it almost implies that like it's not serious. Um I mean, I don't know. People who don't know me very well probably, yeah, I think a lot of people who know me, not, I don't know how to say this. I'm not going to be very good with my words, very smooth with my words today. I'm kind of a little bit out of it, and so um it's yeah, like, I'm going to have a hard time kind of expressing what I'm trying to say, and especially cuz I don't just like openly regularly just like speak about these topics on like a daily basis. I'm for the first time maybe like outwardly verbally forming, not forming, but expressing some of my opinions to someone that's other than somebody that I would be having a conversation with, that I'd be actually interested in. um I'm just generally talking on here, just like in general. um and so I would say, uh you know in queer relationships a lot of times, um you know um something that's not uh mentioned is kind of like that alternative type of non-heteronormative type of relationship. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So there are non-heteronormative relationships. So remember, the first type of scenario that I gave is kind of like the most probably on the most end of one spectrum, where you have almost everything in the culture similar other than the gender. The genders are, cis male, cis female. And there's not just two people together forever. They get married. They're supposed to stay that way till death do them part, and that's it. Um, and that's what's expected. And in the most extreme examples, some of those cultures, have some part of like I don't want to call it shunning. That's a little too strict, but yeah, the Amish would shun. Um, some cultures, people divorce, they shun or kind of like ostracize or make it harder for people who get a divorce. Like you're not as worthy, so we're like, say for example, in like I'm generalizing here, but in like a really strict like Hasidic Jewish culture, if somebody were to divorce, if they go through like a shadchan, which is like a matchmaker, I'm being very general. I am not Hasidic. I do not know. Like I know from what I read and what I've seen, but I'm not a part of this culture directly. But if someone, say for example, a young guy, a young woman, both of them marry each other at, let's say, 20 years old, um and they get married and they're trying to have a kid, and the wife doesn't become pregnant after like a year, 2 years, whatever. um the male might decide, hey, I'm going to divorce her and get a wife that potentially could have babies. um because we need to start, like, it's important in a lot of Jewish like cultures, like it's very, there's a lot of pressure behind like having kids. So people can divorce based on that. I don't know how biblical or Talmudic or whatever, I don't know the laws surrounding it necessarily, but people can divorce based on that. Um, and at least culturally, it seems like something that they accept, to be able to divorce based on you know no pregnancy. And so, you know they're allowed to find another spouse. But then, say that woman, if she goes back to the matchmaker to find her a new husband, she can find a new husband. Like, there will be people in the community that would be a good match, but she's likely not going to get like some virgin man, some 22, let's say they were married for 2 years. Now she's 22. She's probably not going to get some 22-year-old virgin man, who's never been with a woman before, or like whatever they would consider as like the most pure version of like a husband. Like, she'd probably get somebody that's got a little bit of damage going on, or a little bit of a reputation, or someone else who was divorced. So that's what I mean. Like, your opportunities are kind of different if you're divorced in some cultures, versus, American culture is kind of just like, yeah, it's like embarrassing, but you know, Western Americans, if you don't have religion kind of attached to it, you usually kind of just like, it sucks. I'm not saying it's not traumatizing for people, because that's something I think I never really realized, is how traumatizing it must be. Like, I mean, I've had things that I would say I consider traumatizing, just out of just the embarrassment and humiliation of the situation. And to think that like you've had everybody in your life involved in this one thing, um, and then now everybody's all up in your business about it, you know, and it is a very kind of personal decision too, you know. Um, so get some air in here. But yeah, so I would say that, I don't know if I'm giving good examples here. Um, but yeah, that would be like, you know, the far one end of the spectrum is hetero cis couples marrying, maybe divorcing, maybe finding another hetero cis person to marry. Um, that's kind of like what heteronormative culture looks like. And then if you want to think about, yeah, the other far end would be like some other, you know, version of something that we've almost never seen before or heard of, like some kind of like polygamous village or like some kind of like commune where it's like all sorts of genders and sexualities just dating and marrying and having kids with everybody. Like, I've never seen or heard of anything like that. I'm sure it probably exists somewhere. They're probably living off the grid and doing that and whatever, if that's what they want to do. If that is what they feel like is best for them, like who am I to tell them not to do it? But one thing I have noticed though is that, relationships that appear more heteronormative um do seem to get a lot more praise and a lot more validation and a lot less. I don't know if it's always a lot less, but less discrimination or less people like questioning them, right? So say for example, if yes, Christmas is coming up soon. If I've never like brought anybody home for the holidays like that. Uh, I think in my family, my sister is the only one who has, and she's dating a dude that isn't the same race. Um, and it's not like an outward issue, but I can tell like my folks kind of feel a way. I I don't really care. Like, they seem happy together, and that's all that matters to me. Like, I don't really think about it. It doesn't really. But I think the times when I think about it is like say for example, I watched a movie. It was a Christmas movie that I watched over Thanksgiving with my mom, and I told it was like a BET movie. Yeah, I don't remember what it was called, but I think it was called Xmas or something like that. And um, I watched that movie with my mom over Thanksgiving, and or over the weekend. I don't know what day it was, but I watched that movie and um kind of told her, okay, this is what I'm watching. And we kind of watched it together a little bit or mostly, and um we kind of um I thought about that movie and I was like, oh, I wonder, my sister might like this because it was kind of like cheesy. It's things like that when it's like a BET movie or like there's this show that I like that I don't remember really what it's called. Why do people want to park like right next to me every time? Like, there's one, two, three, four, five, 6 spots between me and the next car, and these people want to park like right next to me. Like, seriously. Um, but yeah. So this yeah, sometimes when there's movies like there's a show about this these most of the characters are black, I think. I haven't watched it in a while, but I think they're mostly black and they're just like singles dating young professional black people. I think it takes place in LA and New York. I don't remember which city. I think both cities though. And so yeah. Um and sometimes in that show, they do kind of talk crap about white people, and I kind of think about shows like that. Like, I could probably send it to my sister, but if I was like, hey, like, watch this, you guys should watch this together, like, that might be a little, like, I think about stuff like that I probably wouldn't think about if I sent it to my non-white friends or to someone who's not like dating a white person. uh I kind of do think about it. I'm like, ooh, there's some like racist jokes in this, um you know that aren't too obvious when I'm just watching it by myself. But when I start thinking about, like, I have a lot of friends that aren't black, but they like kind of like black culture content, and they're not black though. And sometimes I want to like recommend like a comedian or something or whatever, but then I'm kind of like, ooh, like, it's a little bit racist. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, things like that. I do think about it when I'm like, I think about it in that way, but outside of that way, I don't really think I really think much more. I'm just kind of like I try to be sensitive about the content that I want to share because I'm like, well, what if my sister's watching this with her boyfriend on Instagram or whatever? Like, I don't want it to be some weird like racist thing, and then like have a habit of sending like racist videos and stuff. Like that would be really awkward. Yeah. Or like, I don't think we have racist books, but there's this book that's called like The Psychology of Blacks or something like that, and like we have it in our house. I think I got it in college or something, or at college, but I don't think I read it in college. I don't remember, but we have that book, and I think I kept it in the bathroom for a really long time, and then after a while, I think once when he was visiting, um, when my sister's boyfriend was visiting, somebody took it out of the bathroom and put it somewhere else, like in my room or on another bookshelf or something. And it's like, yeah, maybe we're cleaning up, or maybe it's like, oh, we have this weird thing about like black people that might be talking about like slave owners or something, like like it's kind of like weird because it's that kind of stuff that's a little awkward. But I have a lot of white family members. It's not like a big issue. It kind of is if it gets to that, but it's not more of a big issue than any other kind of issues that come up with just like people debating over stuff. It's not like anything like that. Like everybody's got their uncle that just like says dumb ignorant shit, like what are you gonna do about it? Like how can you say somebody's racist? It's like you marry into a family of predominantly black people. Yeah, you say a lot of racist things, but I'd say if he is racist, that's really weird, because he's predominantly black. He married a predominantly black family. He married into a predominantly black family. So if he is racist, I mean, that sounds like it's his problem. It's like, what did you think was gonna happen? I don't think he dislikes black people. I just think he doesn't maybe think very highly of anybody, including black people. Like he's got problems with everyone. Like so, I don't really think he's racist. I just think he's ignorant altogether with a lot of things, and very gets very heated about it. But he's the kind of person you just kind of stay away from. You're just like, whatever, buddy. Um, like he's all the way in like a whole other state, and I don't have to talk to him, so it's not really like an issue. And he's never said anything directly to my face. I've just heard about some of the ignorant comments he makes, and I know he doesn't like Muslims, and there's all kinds of people he doesn't like. That I'm just like, this guy's a fool, kind of thing. Like he doesn't sound very intelligent. Like he's not very open minded, but he's got very strong convictions about uh things, and he's not very open minded. Um, I um so yeah, I would say when it comes to like alternative style relationships, and I'm not saying that cis hetero people can't have them too. They can, but I don't need to talk about them because everyone talks about their relationships all the time. Like the issues of what's missing is that nobody talks about the non-hetero stuff. Like nobody talks about it, and when they do, they don't really understand like the scope of things. So I'm trying to put things into perspective, but I think I'm sounding a little um scattered. Um but yeah, so there's um um I think around um uh so when you're thinking about like the heteronorms, that's kind of what it looks like. It's just kind of what you see on classic TV, the Cosbys or whatever. Um, there's not a lot of deviation from any of that. And when you see queer relationships, a lot of times you kind of see that kind of almost it's not heteronormative though because they're not hetero people, but it's like that monogamous lifestyle that comes from hetero culture that's kind of like praised and uplifted. And it's like I do see that sometimes queer people want that approval, you know. I mean, I fall into the pressure of it. That's like, I'm not. always that open with people about what I'm doing, even with my own friends. Like sometimes, um, like I've had like kind of like an open situation with someone that I guess my friends kind of thought I was dating them just because I was trying to distract one of my other friends while he was annoying people. And so I kind of got him in this conversation saying how much I was like really into this person, and because I was, and saying that I would move in with them and all this kind of stuff. And then my other friends overheard it and thought, "Oh, like you're dating somebody." And I was, so they were kind of like congratulations and stuff, and I'm like, "Cool, thanks," you know. And then they kept asking me, "Hey, you know, invite this person, invite them over, you know, like have them over, you know, like when we have events, like invite them, like why aren't you inviting them," kind of thing. And it took me a while to be like, I'm not inviting them because we're not really like a couple like that. Like we go on dates and we have like an intimate relationship, but we're allowed to date other people, and they are in, you know, commitment with another person and are kind of dating another person, and I kind of date around, uh as well as, you know, seeing them, you know, like I'm not gonna try to explain all that to somebody, you know. It's like, how do you explain that? So all I told my friend was like, oh, me and them aren't dating, because it's like, well, we're not dating the way that they think we're dating. Like, this person is not my girlfriend. That's not really what's happening, but it's like we have a situation going on. But, you know, I wouldn't say that situationships and those types of things aren't valid, or that they're less than, or that they're, you know, not important, or that they're, just because something's casual doesn't make it lesser, you know. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. You can still be fully committed to somebody who's even a friend. Like, it doesn't even have to be like a sexual thing. Like, you can be like, have intimate friendships and all kinds of friendships, you know, things ranging from friends to like more than friends to like situationships and friends with benefits, and, you know, dating, multi dating, or whatever you want to call it, you know. And still it's valid, you know. But I feel like a lot of people act like, you know, it's not uh it's not valid if it's not monogamous. If you're, the less monogamous you are, the more the more likely you're just, um the less monogamous you are, the more likely you're just, you know, playing around or not taking it seriously or not having a commitment. But you can have a pretty strong commitment, you know. I think Jess J. Killam made some very, very, very strong points in one of her latest YouTube videos, and I'll post it below so you can watch her video. But she made some really good points that, you know, I think a lot of times in, you know, poly relationships, open relationships, alternative style relationships, there's so much communication. Like, I was explaining this to one of my, um, hmm, sorry, I have to keep drinking water. Um, I was explaining this to one of my hetero cis female friends once, that I was just like, yeah, like when I date people, I learn a lot about like their gender identity, like their preferences, you know, um, you know, all that kind of stuff, you know. Um, we have a lot of conversations about, clothing styles and activities that we do or don't like to do and things like that. And like, there, in my world, the types of people I date, we tend to have a lot of gender related discussions because, there's a lot of gender ish stuff that comes up. It's like, I've gone on a I remember going on a date with a trans lady who wanted to go and try on makeup at the um, at I don't know if it was like a Macy's or something like that. It was something like a Macy's or a um like department store. That's what they're called. It was a department store at a mall, and like we were talking in the car and talking about like, oh, like I, like, she was talking about how she likes to wear heels and all this kind of stuff. I'm a female, and I'm just talking about like I don't really ever wear heels. I don't own any. I don't know anything about makeup. I've never purchased it with my own money. Like I've never bought it before in my life. Like she could have taught me plenty about like heels and makeup and stuff and all that kind of thing. Like I don't know anything about it, but it's like I was born a woman, but I don't really care about it for myself. Like it's not something that I really identify with, that I care for at all. I actually would rather run away from that kind of stuff. I don't really like it. But it's like, if I was dating like like a cis guy who was straight, I don't really think that would come up, but they probably might eventually ask me why I don't wear dresses or makeup and all that kind of stuff. Like they might be a little bit like, you're not very feminine, know. Um, but with other people I've dated that are not cis hetero people, there's a lot of conversations about all kinds of stuff. And I'm not just saying like clothing and makeup are like the only things, but it's like everything. Like there's so many different topics that, I'm not really trying to go into them right now, but my friend, she went this cis hetero friend said that she asked her guy friends, her gay guy friends, if that's what they did in their relationships, and they were like, no, they don't really do that. And so it was kind of like a different um, kind of a scenario because I was like, well, I do that, but it's because of the types of people I'm dating. Like she probably doesn't do that. I mean, her friends probably don't do that because they only date other cis gay men. So if you're only dating cis gay men, you know, yeah, you can talk about all the kind of like, all those kind of like, all that kind of language around like gender and like preferences and identity and all those types of things. But, you're probably not going to really talk about it all that much, like too much. Like you might talk more about like more femme or more mask types of topics, but other than that, I don't really know if you really are going to talk about it that much. Um, but I don't know. That's kind of just how I think about it. I'm kind of like, you know, with alternative, queer relationships, um, there is a lot of conversation about things. What constitutes cheating? Like, I think a lot of times, like, if you're in a cis hetero couple, you might not easily just be like, oh, like, you know, just don't sleep with anybody. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe don't sleep with someone, don't kiss someone, like, whatever. But there might not need to be a whole lot of conversation around that if you're kind of living this monogamous lifestyle. Everyone kind of knows, like, you're monogamous, meaning don't be with other people. But what does that mean? Like, can you cuddle and sleep over in a bed together, and does that count? Like people probably aren't having those discussions on a regular basis. Defining cheating, defining, you know, um, not cheating, like what it looks like to be faithful or whatever you want to call it, um, and kind of follow the rules and look at the rules and maybe alter the rules or change the rules or anything along those lines. It can be it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge to kind of know, um, kind of like what's what. Um, and I would say that you know, like, yeah, it can be hard to kind of know, what to do. Like, and if you don't have a conversation about it, like, it's really going to be hard to guess. Like, if you're dating someone who's already in a relationship with someone, like, it's there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. If you're the new one coming in, you know, like, I don't think I've ever been in a situation that was a poly situation where I didn't know the person was poly. Like, usually they're pretty upfront about it. In my experience, I've only had people be upfront about it and talk about, the details of, their relationship. But I also, if they're with somebody, I don't ask them questions about that. I'm not like, oh, like, I'll ask how someone is or whatever, but I'm not like delving into like their personal business. Like, if somebody tells me something about that person, I'm not like, oh, like, are you guys fighting, or like, like, how's the argument from the other day, or like whatever. Like, I'll ask them like how they're feeling or whatever, or like how they're doing, but I'm not gonna like ask them like keep following up on stuff that's none of my business. I kind of stay in my lane. Like, I care about their well-being, or if they're worried for someone who's having health issues, or if they're worried for someone who's, that they're with, that's like, maybe they're not getting along. Like, yeah, if they want to talk about it, I'll talk about it, but I'm not going to keep like bringing it up. Like, that to me is like weird. Or I'm not going to be like badgering them to like meet the other person. And when I do meet the other person, if I ever do, if or when I do, and there have been times where I haven't, there have been times where I have, um, I try to stay in my lane there too. Like, I've had some situations come up where I don't know how to explain this. Like, sometimes, yeah, I mean, I'm of age to be using substances legally. And I think I've gotten to a stage where I'm pretty responsible, because I just don't have the energy to deal with the irresponsibility. Like, I can't be hungover, the next day, and like waste my whole weekend just like trying to recover from like one party. It's like, I ain't got time for all that. Like, maybe a glass of wine, maybe a cider, a cider bottle at a bar, or like a Corona or something, or a shot of sake or soju or something. Like, I'm not trying to get like plastered anymore. Like, that came and went in my life. I'm no longer interested in that. And same with being stoned. It's like, I don't want to feel it the next day. I don't want to feel any of it the next day. I have plans. Usually my next day is starting at 5 in the morning. I'm not trying to wake up stoned or hungover or groggy or with a headache or like tired. Like, I can wake up that way anyways, even without having substances in my system. So I don't want to take the chance of waking up feeling like not well. So I'm pretty responsible with my substances, but I wasn't always, but now I totally am, because I just ain't got time for all that. But um there was a point where, you know I would maybe want to party with, someone that I met that's maybe like someone else's partner, and it's like, oh, their partner is like a little bit of a party animal. I'm like, I want to go out and hang out with them, but then it's like, the person that I kind of met first, that introduced me to their partner, they're maybe more of a homebody, and then I'm like, oh, like, I really don't want to like stay at your house and like pop popcorn and like watch like boring movies and fall asleep. I'd rather go clubbing with your partner, or like go out and like go to a rave or something, or go, something like that. I'm not saying this isn't even something specific that happened, but I'm just saying, like, I'd rather, like, back then, like, there was a time where I was like, I would rather do that, but then it's like, you can't just be like, oh, I want to do this instead, so I'm gonna go with them. It's like, if we never discuss the rules of like how it is that I'm hanging out with this partner, it's like, I don't have their number, I don't have their contact. So if the person I'm involved with decides that they want to invite their partner around, then that's when I get to interact. I'm not going to interact on my own and just go above them and try to like find other people to like connect with or whatever, in their group of people that they're mingling with or having some intimacy levels with, and just be like, oh, like, I don't know, like, just try to like dip my hand in a little bit of everybody. Like, I'm not trying to like do that, but in a way, in my head, I'm like, this sounds like a fun idea, but I'm like, that'll get me in trouble. Like, I already know, like, if you don't have a conversation about it, you're not just like running around with like everybody and just like, unless neither one of you has an issue with it, then like go do what you're gonna go do. But I mean, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where everyone involved was like super evenly, equally open to just go like, you know, have a spring fling with like everybody, like everybody flinging around with everybody else. Like, I've never been in a scenario like that. And I don't know. I mean, it sounds fun, but it's like, I also very much have limited energy and limited funds. Like, I can't be like out like partying every day and night, and like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I often kind of wonder, because I think that's what people who don't know a lot about that part of the culture, that's what people might think is happening. They think, oh, these greedy cheaters, or just everybody's just like running around cheating and lying on everybody. It's not like the real world, Los Angeles, or like, you know, Real Housewives or whatever of Miami or whatever the heck, where everybody's just doing whatever they're gonna do. Like, there's rules, and if people break the rules, there's gonna be an issue. It's like you can't just do whatever you want to do because you feel like it. There's probably the temptation there, like if you have the energy to do it too, and especially if you're under the influence, like you'll definitely be more at risk of making like weird decisions. um but yeah, I wouldn't really say that it's like um an easy thing to determine how it's going to be. And I think it's hard, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to find someone who likes having alternative style relationships, but kind of it's kind of on my speed and on my level of things. Kind of matches my energy and is a good fit. Um, cause I mean, sometimes that's one thing that I love about it, is that sometimes, just like I said, like there might be a person that I'm with that like the two of us are with each other, and that person might be with another person, and I might still just be like dating on the side, meeting other people, going out on dates, but I'm kind of with this other person. And then this other person is with a different person, like it's more of a permanent thing. And then I might see that I like being around them, and I might spend more time, you know, trying to be together. And then I might meet their partner, and their partner might have different qualities that I might like. Like maybe they're more outgoing, and maybe they're more into the same drugs that I like, and maybe I'm not like doing anything illegal. Well, I don't know if you would consider shrooms illegal. I guess they technically are, so I would say that's about as illegal as I get. Um, I've dabbled in cannabis before it was illegal, but also I'm from California, from LA. Is like it's kind of part of the culture out here. It's not really something that's too much of an issue. Um, and now that it's legalized, it's like even before it got fully legalized, I once I realized that I was going to be carrying it on me and using it, I got a medical card, so I was legally buying it and like purchasing it and having it legally. Um, like ever since I got a medical card, and like before, like I would say if some only if somebody offered, and I would never ask, but only if somebody offered, and it was mostly just smoking weed. If somebody offered it to me, I would partake. And it wasn't that many times. It wasn't like all the time. It was just probably a handful of times, maybe a couple handfuls of times, but it wasn't probably more than like 10 times, maybe about 10 times. I don't really remember, honestly. It wasn't 20 times, I can tell you that much. Um, but I probably started when I was like 14, 15, 16, around there. Um, at Venice Beach, and then went from there. Um, some friends' houses, and then in college, at the back of the campus, off some hiking trail behind the dorms. Um, but that was right before it started to get legalized. And then after that point, once I started like having it on me, like when I wanted to like carry it on me and stuff, and like have like a supply, not like a large supply, but I'm not just like taking a couple hits off somebody's joint and then handing it back. Like once I started having it on me, I was like, let me just get a medical card so that I can legally have it on me, and not like if I do get caught, it's not like I'm going to get in trouble because I legally have a card that says I'm legally allowed to carry this and I was of age. So I just want to clarify that. And then, so when I say drugs, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about alcohol, marijuana, and psilocybin. Some people argue that these are drugs, some people argue that they're not. I will call them drugs just because that's what I like to say, but it's like, I don't consider myself a druggie. I'm definitely a cannabis enthusiast. I love psychedelics. Um, I like I like I like shrooms, but more so like the microdosing. It's kind of more for me. I will recreationally party with stuff, but it's not like all the time, especially because like living in LA, I can't just Uber everywhere like in San Diego, so I'm very rarely going to be under the influence of things. I'm not spending like a $60 Uber one way downtown just to go to like a rave and then come back home, $120 in Ubers just for like a 5 milligram edible, It's like, to me, it's like such a waste of money. But that's literally the extent I go through, to make sure I'm doing things like safely. It's like, but then I do tend to take more because I'm like, I say this with my friends a lot too. It's like you got to get your money's worth. I'm not just gonna have like a little sip of a beer. If I'm drinking and I Ubered, I'm gonna drink that night. Because I spent all that money on the Uber. Um, so then I'm definitely drinking. And I'm definitely gonna regret it the next day. But I don't know. If you're young, don't do drugs. Don't do drugs. Don't dabble in things till you're of a legal age, and learn about it before you dabble. Learn about it, research it, ask around. Don't just wait till your 21st birthday party till somebody decides to give you whatever alcohol that's usually the crappiest, cheapest thing because nobody can afford anything. You're usually going to get cheap, crappy alcohol and you're going to feel terrible, and you're going to regret it. But um in moderation, things can be nice. Just like coffee. You don't want to drink too much coffee. You're gonna regret it. Uh you don't want to have too much of anything. You know, it kind of takes the fun out of it. Um, but anyways, I'm not trying to like rant about drugs. I'm just saying when I say drugs, that's kind of what I mean. I'm not like talking about like coke and like like whatever. But I'm not like too hung up on things like ayahuasca, acid, like I don't know. I'm not really too hung up on that kind of stuff. Um, but a lot of people are, so it's controversial. So we're talking about a different controversial subject, though. We're not talking about drug controversy. We're talking about this other stuff. But I would say, it's hard for me to date someone who's like fully sober. Um, just and especially if they want me to just like only date them. I don't think I would do that. Actually, I don't think I would. I don't think. I don't know. I'm just now realizing this, that I don't think I would want to be in a monogamous relationship with someone who is sober and isn't okay with me not being sober. I don't think I could do that. I don't think I'd want to do that. It's too limiting for me. That's my personal opinion. I'll probably change it maybe when I'm like 80. I don't know, but um I personally, I don't care if other people think that that's for them, like that's fine. But for me, that you know it's things like that that are kind of like the benefit of having some kind of alternative, you know Like, I have, like, a lot of us are multifaceted, and I think it's hard to find sometimes like one person who kind of gets you on all levels, or even to put that pressure on one person to kind of like be that one person. That's kind of how I feel. That to me is mostly the appeal to, alternative type of relationships, these multi-dating types of things. um just because it's like I don't feel like I'm obligated to be, energized for this one person. It's like they have someone else, or if they need someone else, they can find a different someone else. If I can't be available, or they don't have to rely on me. Like, maybe they like the feminine side of me, but they want like a cis straight man. I can't be a cis straight man. If they want to go date a cis straight man, they can go find a cis straight man. I'll be over here. you know it's like things like that. Like, some people want their needs met on different levels, and one person sometimes can't really do that. And I don't think it's a greed thing necessarily. And I just think it's just a different way of looking at things, because I know, you know a lot of times people do say like, oh, like, I want to find like the perfect fit, like the, person that, like, makes me whole or whatever. I don't really think like that, but I don't think anyone can make you whole but yourself. I don't think it's very wise to rely on anybody else to try to make you whole. um I mean, I would say that if somebody does leave another person, though, it could leave like a hole in you, like HOLE, like a hole, like a void, just because you've built and kind of like developed this shared life together for so long. If they leave, you're gonna notice. Kind of like when I lived in a house of like 6 or 7 people. When I no longer lived with other that many other people, I noticed it. I felt it, even though I didn't even want to live with them in the first place. I was like, oh, like, I'm living with just one other person, an old lady that's my mother, and like, I'm just living with one other person, and I can, I don't have to worry about how long I'm spending in the bathroom because it's my bathroom. Like, I don't have to worry about anybody using up all the freaking hot water. You know, I don't have to worry about who's cooking in the kitchen for too long, and like, am I gonna have to wait 3 hours to cook my dinner, or am I the first one in here? And now there's gonna be people standing here talking to me the whole time because they're waiting to cook. Like, there's 5 to 6 less people that I just don't have to deal with anymore. Um, but I'm not gonna start ranting about the roommates. Don't worry. Um, I think I'm kind of mostly over that. Thankfully for you guys, I think I'm mostly over that. But um, yeah, I bet that was hard to listen to. It was hard to deal with. That must have been hard to like listen to all those podcast episodes about me ranting about those idiots. But it was my fault too. I shouldn't have stayed there for so long. That was my own stupid problem. I'm not stupid, but that was a stupid decision. To stay there for so long and try to write it out. I could have done much better for myself, for sure. Um, but yeah. So yeah, I would say it's definitely, you know, um a challenge. It can be a challenge to, you know, um try to find everything in one person, or grow together with one person. Like, I think, I don't know, for me that just feels like a lot to put on one person. I feel like it's a lot to put on me, you know. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, like, if you're having a bad day, like, I'm not going to be there because you have somebody else. But it's just kind of like, I don't know, it does kind of take a bit of the pressure off. It's like having other people to rely on. It's almost like if you have a family that's like, let's say they're like a decent family that you can like, that people are reliable. It's almost like having a family that's like a big family where people can rely on each other. Or a small family with like 2 people. It's like sometimes you benefit from having more options of people in your corner. It doesn't mean you have to be having sex with all of them or any of them for that matter. Like sex is not like a necessity or like a mandatory thing. Um, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it doesn't have to be like a mandatory thing. There are plenty of sexless relationships out there. They're just valid too. All right. Well, I think I've said mostly everything, but um, yeah, I gotta get driving home, so I'll talk while I drive. Um, but yeah, I'll post it below. Check out that Jay Killam episode. It's pretty interesting. Um, and she's got a lot of good stuff about kind of like different alternative ways of thinking about things. Um, I mean, for me, I've kind of expressed my appeal about um, poly relationships, open relationships, kind of like alternatives to um, the classic um, alternatives to the classic, you know, hetero monogamous situations that people have going on. I'm not saying that they're not valid. I'm just saying, like, you know, I do notice that there is a lot of pressure to not do anything alternative, even when you are already gay or whatever you are, queer or whatever. Um, there still can be that pressure to be as close to like a heteronormative situation as possible. Um, and I don't know, like it's just I don't know. I guess that's I've never liked the idea of somebody thinking I'm some kind of like weird freak, but also I've always like almost everything about me is like so different from everybody else. Like racially, you know, the things that I choose culturally don't fit stereotypically with my race. The things that I have as like hobbies and interests don't necessarily fit like stereotypically with my gender. Um, just being where I'm from and everything, it's like I don't live in an area where I'm like the majority in any way. There aren't a lot of black people, there aren't a lot of queer people, there aren't a lot of people my age, there aren't a lot of people from my ethnic background. I've just never been like the majority, like ever. I've always been like the odd one out, and kind of adding extra layers to that can be a little bit stressful. It's like, oh, like now you're the gay one, and then it's like, oh, not only are you the gay one, but you're the gay one who's doing like other weird things that you have to like describe to everybody. Like you don't really have to describe it, but it's like I honestly kind of avoid talking to people about stuff until I'm kind of sure that they're pretty open. Like I've got some friends I can definitely talk to about stuff that I know kind of get it. And I don't mind people asking questions. That's not really what I'm saying. It's just kind of the way they ask questions. Like I don't like people grilling me. Like I have some friends that kind of like they like to challenge, like grill in a way that they're like challenging things all the time. Like I had one friend who was asking me like once kind of like why are you always dating people that seem to like move or like they don't live in the same state or whatever, and it's like or not the same state but like the same area of the city or whatever, and I'm just like it doesn't matter to me, like that doesn't disqualify a person for me, you know, but it's like trying to point out that like you're doing something different and like why don't you do things in a way that might seem easier or might seem more like what, you know, she thinks I should be trying to do, or other friends that just like to ask a lot of questions just because they're curious. And that's fine to be curious, but it's like there's an amount of curiosity that's like it can get to the point of people being disrespectful. And, you know, when you're different, there is something that, you know, sometimes people don't really treat you like a human. They treat you like a zoo animal or like a freak show of nature kind of thing. Like I that's kind of extreme to say. Like I don't get treated like that, but I'm just saying like people kind of forget, like, hey, I'm the same friend that you just invited out to dinner, and now you're gonna try to like challenge me on some like weird thing, that like nothing about. It's like I don't describe my whole life to certain people, and I just had to lay it out to them once. I was just like, look, I don't really see myself in a monogamous relationship, getting married to somebody, having kids, and a house and a family and all that. Like that in my head, it's like I don't know if that's how things are gonna look, and I don't really foresee it that way. And I'm not striving to have that necessarily. And so why would I need to follow all these other rules that would lead me to want to have that? Like, if you want that, then you're going to date in a certain way. If you don't really want that, then the way you date and the way you meet people is going to look completely different than the way you meet other people. Um, but then the way other people meet other people, it's like, you know, I don't mind if somebody lives 100 miles away. If it's not like a monogamous situation and they're with somebody already and they've got another partner or something, you know, we're not going to be seeing each other all the time anyways. So why do I need to live like that close to them? It's like we still meet each other just about as much as we would see each other in the first place. Like why should it be, based on what they think, you know? Like some people their minds are just so narrow with things that they kind of get a little like weird. Um I think that's why they get weird though, is cuz they're a little uncomfortable. It's like sometimes I just like to throw the questions back at people and be like, "Well, why do you do what you do?" Like can't you see? It's like you're doing what you're doing because it makes sense to you. I'm doing what I'm doing because it makes sense to me. You know, like don't try to like call me like a weirdo or say I'm doing something in a way that's like not making any sense. Like just because it doesn't make sense to someone else's narrow mind doesn't mean that you're you're doing something that's invalid. If you're enjoying it and nobody's getting hurt in the process and they're all enjoying it and you're all having like a happy time together, I'm not saying that there's never going to be conflict, but if it's healthy and safe, I don't see any reason why people shouldn't be allowed to just do what they want to do. If it's healthy, safe, uh I can't really throw legal in there, but I just mean like age wise legal, or like if you're not like breaking any like humanitarian laws and like using people, like if somebody has like a disability and you're trying to like marry them and get money and they can't really understand what's going on, that is abusive. But I mean, if you're just trying to like chill, like I don't really see any way that it is wrong. um but that's kind of my viewpoint on it. But I'll try to find the video and post it below. If you guys like these topics, I basically record, not always, but I try to record topics once I look at analytics and see kind of what people are gravitating towards. So if I see people gravitating towards this kind of stuff, then I'll probably post more about it. Not necessarily like the poly and alternative stuff, but maybe I'll dive deeper into like the details. Not not like, it doesn't need to be explicit. You can figure that out for yourself. But I mean the details as like more categories of things and kind of more clarity on like how things actually look, um with people's differences. 'Cause I think that's important. But yeah, guys, thanks for listening to all these episodes. We'll be back on here soon, but hopefully this is useful, helpful information.